Well, while we wait for people, I am going to go off on my little spiel here about who is sponsoring this this event, and that would be Gris Literatura. And I'm going to share my screen so you can see some stuff. I wish I had this. Oh, hold on. There's a picture of Paula.
I wasn't ready for that.
Sorry. I didn't have my screens ready. So yes, this is the website for Gris Literatura, www.grisliteratura.com. We are a nonprofit, literary nonprofit that was founded very auspiciously 6 days before quarantine started in March. Yes. Timing. It's all about timing. Basically, our deal is we want to be a valued resource for the poetry community. Now, because of Zoom, we can say the poetry community anywhere in America or Canada or, what have you. You can reach us. At that point, we're thinking locally, the Twin Cities poetry community. One of the things, though, we wanted to, being a resource, support the continued practice of poetry and support the poetry community. But one of the things that we have found that is very important to support the poetry community is if you want to support poetry, you got to pay poets. And so that is a foundational practice of ours. 100% of ticket sales for our events go to the participating poets and artists. Any of our classes, 100% of the registration fees or enrollment fees for the class will go to the poets, the teaching artist as well. I would advise, if you can, to follow us on. See if I can get to it. The thing is blocking my attempt, but we have Eventbrite, which I think would be a really good way of people. There we go. Finding us, and where, if you're take a look at where our what events we have going on. So there's this one right now. Then we have a Masters of Poetry class on Anna Akhmatova, Marina Svatayeva, Wednesday, May 5th. And then Lisa Krawczyk has been teaching a formal poetry class. And this time it will be on the triolet, which I have no idea what that is. But then I don't know formal poetry very well, which is why I go to the classes. If you could, so you can find us on Eventbrite. You can also find our events also listed on our calendar page. And you can, on our website, sign up to get our newsletter, which is a pretty cool thing. Which will also tell you about what's happening each month. It comes at the very beginning of the month, at the the first usually. And I would like to inform you of what our next big thing is, which is going to be a reading curated by, or a reading roundtable curated by Athena Kildegard on motherhood and poetry. You may know that Athena and Margaret Haas put together a wonderful book last year, Rocked by the Waters. I advise you to pick it up. And that is going to be kind of like the basis for it. And she's going to have Jen Given, Hope Wabuke, Molly Sutton Kiefer, and herself. So yes, you will definitely want to do that. So there's my spiel. And let us get back. It's good to see all your faces again. I want to start off, before we get into some work, how has, for each of you, how has the practice of astrology, I Ching, Tarot, Labyrinths, how has that affected, how would you say it's affected your art? And, you know, how has it, you know, has it opened up some channels for artistic expression that you didn't know you had, or what?
I'll start. So for me, not being a professional reader of any kind, and Labyrinths too, isn't that such an introvert's practice, right? But making that space and that receptive, meditative space is so crucial, and it feels very tied in with imagistically and in every way to the creative process for me. Both of those practices ground and enlarge my vision. And I also was thinking about the humility of both of them, right? Like whether it's an intuitive practice or a meditative practice or an artistic practice, like we're all just in a long line of practitioners. And I really love to feel that connection to everyone else. So those are some of the ways that I find it grounds me.
Well, I know for myself that I didn't actually go, it didn't occur to me to, well, first off, I returned to poetry long after I had started reading Tarot. I've been one of those persons who, you know, did it in their 20s and then decided I really sucked and burned the whole lot of it. But even after returning to poetry, I didn't really think of consciously using Tarot at all to for writing. But I think definitely as it, you know, opened myself up to myself, it became a lot easier for me to, I felt like I became a lot more creative with imagery. You know, being able to see things in a more, I mean, poetry is a lot the practice of metaphor, and metaphor is, you know, foundationally important to the Tarot, to finding meaning in that. So in a way, you know, I'm practicing that muscle by doing these readings And again, that translation aspect too, I'm practicing that muscle, whether I'm doing the reading for myself and needing to make sense of it for myself, or doing the reading for, for somebody else. And then I'm, doubly using that to try to like translate not just what I'm seeing, but also, does this make sense for you? This is what I see right here. And actually, it didn't really occur to me to consciously start using it until, for me meeting Paula, because we kind of spoke a lot about tarot and stuff, and, for whatever reason, it just didn't I just didn't think of it. So, but yeah, it's definitely, there's a lot of fertile ground there when you start opening yourself up to that.
I think, like, I'm a writer, and poetry, I've taken plenty of poetry classes in college, and I don't think I ever did really well. But I do attribute, I guess, if one wanted to say like rapping, or if rapping is seen as poetry, then I would say, yeah, I'm a poet. And I definitely believe sound has everything to do with how one is able to entrance and just enliven something. So working with the I Ching and it bringing me deeper into like the East, essentially, because I've been a big lover of this Eastern philosophy since I was a child. So it just re-sparked this energy that for some reason is now really making my imagination just fire off 24/7. And I find myself diving deeper back into my craft, which is writing, which is music, even just performing. And I'm not an actor, but I guess when you guys are doing readings, or I don't know how you guys practice, but when you're doing a reading, I don't know if another voice comes out, or if you somehow get entranced or something, like that has become a lot easier. And noticing that makes me do my art better. It's like whatever voice this is like able to transmute all of the thoughts that I'm, having that might be restricting me from producing the words on the page or what have you. But once I allow the voice to speak, it's like, it's golden. At least in my mind, it's golden. So I will say, like, the practice definitely is making me realize how much I need this creative godly principle to really express whatever is like hidden deep within me. So yeah, I'm happy about it, and I hope other people's practices really inspire them to do that as well.
Yeah, I love those responses from each of you. I also want to just address this question from Rhonda about how, I think the question is how we use intuition in our creative process, which, we've been walking around that question. I'll just speak, I identify probably more as a musician than as a poet, but I want to talk a little bit about intuition and trust, I guess, because to me, if I'm giving a reading, and again, each of us kind of has these different traditions that we're speaking about, because that really kind of gives a container for intuition. Like if I can channel intuition through an astrology reading in a way that I can't, I think, as if effectively without that, again, symbolic language. But as I'm doing that and I'm engaging in this act of translation, I have to trust my instincts here. I have to trust that if I want to blurt something out, even if it sounds really weird, that if it's coming, it's coming. And I've learned, over time that if I can trust that, to kind of step aside and not obstruct what seems to want to come through. Oftentimes it's those very weird things that want to be said that land the most directly with people. So like, I might not even understand what I'm saying, but if I feel this urge to say it, that usually tends to be something that is very meaningful to the person that I'm reading for. So as I practice this particular intuitive art, I've had to trust that, like I'm myself, I guess. So to me, intuition and trust are really connected. And I'm coming back to Moray's idea of this intuitive logic, the way that there's a part of the psyche that's able to connect things that seem not to connect, but somehow, our higher mind, if you like, can see that there's a relationship. And so there's something like that happening when I'm giving an intuitive reading, and I just have to trust what's coming through. And that, to me, is directly connected to the creative process. Like, to kind of step aside and not judge it, not censor it, not limit what's possible, but just let it come through. It takes a certain trust. So for me, the intuitive practice and the artistic practice are so similar. But I don't write songs about astrology or about the tarot. I don't use the subject matter directly, but I would say that the process of kind of learning to trust intuition has freed me up to learn to trust my creative function. So I don't know if that's like too indirect, but I do have a little PowerPoint deck myself, if I can maybe pull that up, because I had fun finding examples of people. Oh, I hope I can do this. Security. There are poets and songwriters who do use astrological vocabulary in their content, in their.
Uh-oh. I think we just lost Andrea.
Oh no. Until she comes back, which I bet will be any second, I could field a little bit about this question too, if that's useful. I think I already talked a lot of, about my project-based process, the way that I use tarot and with people, and the way that I've walked labyrinths. But other artists, I don't know if you've ever read The Castle of Cross Destinies by Italo Calvino. It's a little bit like an Italian tarot-based Canterbury Tales.
Really?
Yeah. So it starts out that all of these people meet on this journey, but they've all lost their ability to speak, but they've got the tarot cards. And then he writes this whole novel with these, like, that's the frame story. And then everyone's stories are all in tarot. So it's a nice little placeholder until Andrea gets back. I'll put it in with the list of recommendations.
Oh, there she is.
I want to see that, Paula. That looked cool. Thank you. Sorry about that.
There we go.
No?
I can see that.
Yeah, so I found one poem I did want to read. This is by Gina Osman. And so, thinking of the way astrology can be a source of artistic inspiration. And Paula, when you were speaking about writing the tarot poems, I was really getting that kind of sense, almost like the tarot readings were a muse in and of themselves. And I think astrology can be that way too. So this poem is really long. So I'm going to just read excerpts from it. Mercury rising, a visualization. There will be 3 parts. Pay attention to your breath. Breathe deeply in through your nose, out through your mouth. When you breathe out, your breath becomes visible. A mist that you inhale through your nose and exhale from your mouth in a circle. You are surrounded by this mist and it becomes denser like a fog. Then the fog clears and you are on the bank of a river. Listen to the sound of the wide river. look out and see the opposite bank. There's a sandy beach and a forest beyond the sand. There's a boat with an old woman and an old man, and without a word, they take you across to the other side. As they take you, you can see stones, clear water. You can hear the water against the sides of the boat. When you get to the sandy beach, you get out of the boat, knowing that it will be there for you when you return, and you leave the boat, the man and woman behind. In the solar system, Mercury is the planet closest to the sun. You can see it in the sky only in the morning and at sunset. The Greeks initially thought it was two planets and named the morning one Apollo and the sunset one Hermes, but they eventually determined it was in fact one planet, and the Romans renamed it Mercury. It was once thought to be tidally locked, with one side always facing the sun and one side always in darkness. This theory was debunked in the 1960s when Mercury was proved to have an eccentric orbit. In 1974, the Mariner spaceship did a flyby and mapped almost half of Mercury's surface. In 2008, the Messenger mapped another 30%. Hermes was the Greek god of boundaries, travelers, shepherds, thieves, poets, commerce. He was the intermediary for any kind of exchange, transition, or crossing over. Thus, his role as a psychopomp, leading Eurydice back to the underworld after Orpheus gave in to his fears and stole a glance. The Romans adapted him as Mercury and kept him in the same outfit, winged hat, winged sandals, winged staff. Julius Caesar remarked that Mercury was a popular god with conquered populations. They often melded his attributes with gods of their own. So this poem, as I read it, and again, it's very long, it to me kind of weaves in and out of a more like a descriptive landscape, features of the planet Mercury itself, and features of this mythological character Hermes, and then this more inner, very personal psychological landscape of the poet. And in astrology, we think of the planets as either being very personal, like these are the inner planets closest to the sun, or being more transpersonal, being further from the sun. The planets kind of fall in these two clusters. So I felt with this poem that the author was introducing Mercury as a way to kind of explore the personal consciousness. So thinking of astrology as a muse. So it was really fun to find some examples of musicians who reference astrology in their work. So I just want to give some examples. Diana Ross and the Supremes, no matter what sign you are, you see the zodiac here around the Supremes. This part is just kind of fun, so I'm not going to go in depth here at all, but Chris Christopherson, Jesus was a Capricorn. Here's Joni Mitchell. The first line of this song on the album Blue is this line about a woman born with the moon in Cancer. And moving into a different song, here's Adam Ant. The fifth song on this track is called Scorpio Rising. And if you know anything about astrology, tell me if you're surprised that Adam Ant might have a Scorpio ascendant. It struck me as so obvious. This is John Coltrane, the tracks from Interstellar Space. And John and Alice Coltrane were both extremely interested in astrology. So they dedicated entire bodies of work to their astrological studies. And then, of course, there's Outcast, amazing album, Aquemini, and you see the glyphs here, right? Here's Aquarius over on the left, Gemini on the right. And then I kind of wanted to flip this around and talk about the way, I've already spoken about this, but the way that we can use poetry to really make a rich and meaningful astrological analysis. I don't want to repeat myself, but just to give some examples, when you're speaking to a person, you want to give them some imagery and some kind of linguistic containers that they can really sit and marinate in. And so I find like the more that I study the meanings in astrology, the more I can really create a very vivid, imagistic description for a person. So like if we just take the sign of Scorpio alone, this is something I like to tell people who are very scorpionic, people who maybe are, you know, have the sun in Scorpio, the rising sign is Scorpio, or maybe they have a Scorpio moon. I really like to go deeper into the myth of this sign, because there are 3 archetypes in this single sign alone. And of course, we think first of the Scorpion, and that pertains to only the first 10 degrees of the sign of Scorpio. So if we come back to this slide, you see that there are these, you see the signs of the zodiac on the inner periphery, and then you see outside there are these divisions, and these are called decans. So each sign is divided into 3 decans. So the first decan of the sign Scorpio has to do with the scorpion itself. And the scorpion in the myth is interested in the emotional heart of the matter, the fundamental emotional truth. So the scorpion dives deep, deep, deep into the quicksand, down deep into the earth to get to what is really at the root, the deepest feelings. And then after it's gotten down and it's discovered this gem of truth that lies at the base of this courageous expedition, then the scorpion rises. And this is the second archetype of Scorpio. This correlates to the second decan. And this is the phoenix rising from the ash. So this is the second archetype. So now we have this bird rising in a kind of rebirth, up, 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 back to the surface of the earth. So here you see the archetype of death and rebirth with Scorpio. And as the phoenix rises, it comes up into the air, and as it rises higher, it ultimately transforms into the eagle. And that's the third archetype of this sign. And the eagle soars and can see not only where it has been, but also it can put this emotional truth into a bigger context. And eventually the eagle soars so far that it moves into the next sign, which is Sagittarius. We think of the archer, but we think of traveling long distances. That's a process that started back in Scorpio. So before Sagittarius can go far, you need the Scorpio deep dive and rebirth. And usually when I share this part of the Scorpio story with people who have a very scorpionic placement, it means something to them. Like they can connect with a part of this, or they feel this kind of process, happen in their life in some way, this kind of deep dive and sort of a surrender into the truth and a death and rebirth, So that's just an example of how you can speak about the mythology, and you can speak about the complexity of these archetypes to really make a richer reading, and I think any of us who have read our sun sign horoscopes can see how simplistic they can be. They're not terribly inspiring most of the time. They have a pat quality, but if you can apply some of the poetry of the myth to the reading, it can be much richer. I think because of time, I won't get into the next, but I was planning to speak about Lilith, the asteroid that goes by the name Lilith, or Black Moon Lilith, and her story and the mythology of her. But I think I'll skip that just to come back and hear if other people want to speak about the creative process and intuition, or anything else that came up here.
Well, I know that I would like to hear some of Paula's stuff, and I would like to, even though this is out of print, correct? Misplaced Sinister. This is the book on written pretty much, well, it starts right off with the Labyrinth. It's a fantastic book. It's actually when the sinister is about being left-handed. So, and I didn't realize until reading it that you're left-handed. So, but
I'm not. Misplaced sinister is what they call when someone's retrained from left-handed to right-handed.
oh, got it.
Isn't that a dark term though?
Yeah, it is.
It's a weird
It
thing
is.
to a person too, but yeah. Sometimes I'm left-handed still. My unconscious is left-handed.
It doesn't change how your brain is wired, right? Because the whole thing is, if you're left-handed, then you're right-brained.
Yeah.
So.
I don't, yeah. But I would be happy to read a couple of things, and you have some pieces too, right, David? You were going to read.
Yeah, actually, I have one that was inspired by your class.
Hey. I would have listened all day, by the way, Andrea. I'm sorry that you didn't talk about Lilith. Maybe there'll be time still. So, okay. So the thing I like about this book cover, though, is that this labyrinth doesn't work. If you ever try to, it's all blocks. It's great. It's a very thematic. So this is just a little bit of, okay. So the two words get used synonymously, but a labyrinth is not a maze, and a maze is not a labyrinth. A maze is multi-cursal. It consists of complex branching passages through which the solver must find a route. A labyrinth, on the other hand, has only one single folding, twisting path meant to lead a person to the center and back out the same way. It's unicursal. In the Jim Henson film Labyrinth, for example, David Bowie plays the Goblin King, and he demands that teenage Sarah make her way through his labyrinth to win back the baby brother she had wished away. The Goblin King is mistaken, however. He rules a maze, or more accurately, he rules a tour puzzle, which is another kind of a multi-cursal game where new paths can open suddenly and a solver must overcome challenges. The film should have been named Tour Puzzle, but of course that's terrible. Hi, you love Zoom. This is Ruth Bader Ginsburg, everyone. Oh, now it just seems like I'm talking to myself. She's right there. So the first poem in Misplaced Sinister, because the book is out of print, is also the first poem in Quitter, which is, again, pretty labyrinth based, and it's just almost like directions. So into the labyrinth. Enter with a question, the path folds, and I pleat the outskirts with following, sunrise and chill, whatever you carry in, carry out, groggy, novelty, absence, luck, some blackbirds observe from an ash tree, the path folds, and I am no more than a sinew, a flowering. I'm afraid that my impression of stillness, the walls are suggestion, are more of a rule one agrees to follow. My impression of a question is a stillness. I'm afraid that the path's folds resemble picking off the petals of a question, like the boss of all flowers, a single pathway in to the center. It's not a maze. You'll follow the single path out. The path whose folds resemble insomnia, yes, and also my impression of seeking. I'm afraid that there's a prison, cochlear progression round these circuits, like the boss of all asking, sawtooth and cusp. How can I possibly be doing this right? Rose petal stations. I'm afraid that some blackbirds observe my impression. The walls are not mineral, vegetable, animal, a game, human, the noumenon. There's a prison at the heart of everything. I'm afraid that there's a prison at the heart of everything. When you have reached the center, you are halfway. Thanks. Oh, thank you.
Oh, love that one. Yeah, I have, well, on that, I had promised Andrea that I was going to read this one. This was the poem that I had started. So Paula had mentioned that she teaches, what, a once a year class on labyrinths. So I took it this January, and it was really fascinating. It was about creating first draft, in a sense, using labyrinths in order to create work for a first draft. It worked for me, actually. And I'm not a person who writes to writing prompts very well at all. So I was surprised. But the first of, so it's almost kind of, it felt to me kind of like a guided meditation that you were taking us on. And beginning with the whole, you were talking about the labyrinth and the myth of the Minotaur and such, and that we were supposed to follow a red thread that the hero was Jason, right? So who was the hero who went into the
Theseus.
labyrinth?
Yeah, Theseus. Yeah.
Theseus. Yeah. And the way that he did it is that he used a red thread so that he could follow his way back out from that. So that's where kind of the guided meditation went. And this is where I went with it instead. And it's called Abraxas. And the whole thing about that name, Abraxas is, they think it came about, it's used a lot in like medieval magic. And it's basically, it's the basis of where we get the nonsense word abracadabra. And it was something that Abraxas could have possibly been a person who was a great mage. Some think that it's a misspelling of a Greek word, abrasax. Basically, though, it doesn't really mean anything, but got used a lot in things like alchemy and stuff like that. Abraxas. A crimson thread extended from here to there will not see you out, and you find every turn takes you back to where you are, and you are here, led to this, an impenetrably vaulted room bounded by clouds, where there is no to or from, just one harrowing here. No, as you try to unravel the riveting skein binding your wrists, you will but find the floor sinking beneath your feet, its morass of sand binding your ankles, pulling you deeper and deeper, dragging you into the very pit of your being. And there, at the bottom of the world, the black tendrils of a suffocating night embrace you and drag you face to face to what awaits you. In the nadir of your soul, enormous emptied eyes, vacant, open mouth, gaping, frog-faced, eagerly swallowing up your horror, whispering an existential nausea, a thing of terror incomprehensible, the sickening knowledge of the abominable truth of us. You can blame all of that on Paula. No, actually, I mean, that's an example of a poem based on doing like a labyrinth. So in a way, you know, and so that's at the center of my labyrinth, which is horrific.
That's part of the practice though, right? Like we're our own minotaur.
Yeah, exactly. So it was, I never expected to write anything Lovecraftian. So. Yeah, and I have one, if it's okay. I have a, well, there's lots of stuff that has been done with Tarot, and I had wanted to get a little bit into Yeats, but his poem, The Tower, from his book, The Tower, is 6 pages long. So suffice to say, having read The Tower, the book, I would say that that book in itself is like Yeats's description of the tower, you know, because it's just, if I can use the word harrowing again, you know, and the tower, of course, is that you know, the picture of the tower being destroyed because it's rotten. And they wrote that book right after, you know, the pandemic, and from, you know, the pandemic, the Easter uprising, and World War I, and in his old age. So I think he was taking a look at all of that crap and thinking, holy shit. Yeah, who else has something that they'd like to share?
Typically would have something to share, but my stuff is rather rated R. So I'll keep that to myself.
Well, from the audience, anybody have questions at all before we wrap up? You can unmute yourself. I think you can.
I have a question for Moray. Do you ever use the I Ching like while you're writing? Like I've taken those awesome classes with Paula as well, where we actually used tarot, like as we're writing in the same way, or the I Ching. Sorry, I totally pronounced it wrong. I can explain better what that question is if you're not sure what I'm saying.
I understand, but I wouldn't mind hearing if you could explain more.
Okay, so basically, like one thing that we did in Paula's class was she pulled a card every minute, and then you write a line in that minute and compose a sonnet. Like so, 14 cards were pulled, or I've done that for myself too. Like I'll write a sonnet using the tarot cards and like writing a line for each one, either based on the image or just like the interpretation of the image. And so I wonder if you ever use the I Ching in a similar way, like to actually do like a use it as a kind of a prompt or an exercise rather than like a literal like reading for someone else or for yourself. Does that help?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. No, actually, I use the hexagrams in one of my, I guess it's a series, a novel or whatever, for each chapter, so that you can actually follow along with what the energy is going to be for that kind of that story. So if it looks like it's all, you know, water, which would be which hexagram is that? Maybe 36, which is all water, which is all about falling and the abyss and darkness. You can guarantee that it is going to be a very dark kind of chapter. Or yeah. So yeah, I do it like that.
I know I had
Awesome.
a friend, John Winstrom, who I was just recalling this, tried to write a poem for each one of the I Ching. And he also, it wasn't just a poem, he threw like a form onto it. So they were 6 lines. And then he did something, depending on whether it's a full line or a broken line, it influenced what the meter of the rhyme is.
Ooh.
So not sure what happened to that. I told him if he ever completed that, he should definitely seek some publishing. So I'm not sure where he kind of lost touch with him. So I'm not sure where he's at. But
He's a psychologist? Is he a psychologist?
No.
Okay. The name sounded familiar.
Oh, okay.
Or is one of the hexagrams called 1,000 times you lose your treasure?
I'll say it one more time.
1,000 times you lose your treasure. Is that one of the choices? Hexagrams?
That I don't recognize. The names for themselves are pretty simple and small, but it's possible that one is titled that, but I don't recognize that.
There's another poet who I think has a book based on, she's also a tarot reader, Hua Wen, and that's the name of the book. And I thought it was maybe I Ching based because she practices that too. So
I'd be curious about that.
All right.
Thank you everyone for coming. Are there any other questions or comments? Any last thoughts? Okay.
I would just say that I think any practice that opens up your intuitional faculties is really can be a great resource for your practice of art, whether that be poetry or music or what have you. So. All right. Well, thank you guys so much. I've recorded this, and when some point in the next few weeks, or probably in a month, we'll get it out onto our YouTube channel. We do have a YouTube channel, Gris Literatura, and we've got some videos out there. We actually have quite a few videos from a 2-hour-long discussion I had with Dr. Robert Roddy last year on Yeats in Haiti, and we covered parts of the tower in that. So yeah, you can go out there and check it out. It's broken down into digestible pieces of about 20 to 30 minutes a piece. And then we have from a previous reading roundtable back in January that Paula was a part of on healing in crisis. We have video from that, and then this one will be joining it eventually. So please stay in touch with Gris Literatura via our website and get the newsletter, subscribe to the newsletter if you wish. That's an even better way. And thank you so much. Thank you so much, Paula. Thank you, Moray. Thank you, Andrea, for being a part of this weird thing. And with that, I bid you all adieu. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone. Thanks.
yeah, thanks for making this space. It was really lovely. Thank you.
Thank you.